Hi, have you ever met someone and within minutes you are laughing, chatting, exchanging ideas, and you just feel alive after the conversation? Or have you noticed how a good conversation can lighten up your mood faster than anything else? That lightness, curiosity, and the joy of just exchanging idea is the Gemini energy within you. So let's explore that in this episode. So, in this episode, we'll explore the third sign of the zodiac, Gemini, ruled by Mercury. So, Gemini, if you know a little bit of astrology, is often described as the curious, social, clever, changeable sign, and sometimes talk a lot. Well, that is all true, but they are all surface words. To really understand Gemini, we have to go to the myth because Gemini isn't just a personality type, it's an archetype of consciousness itself. So let's start. What is Gemini really? When you look at the word Gemini, it comes from the Latin word Gemini, which means twins. And if you look at the symbol, it reflects just that two upright parallel lines, the twins, but they are joined at the top and the bottom. So most of you who will think about twins, they will think, well, twins means two of everything. It's duality, confusion, contradictions of Gemini. We often talk about that contradictions of Gemini's, how they show up. But that's not what the symbol is showing. These aren't two figures drifting apart. They're like two pillars standing side by side. They're connected. One line here represents the upper world, the ideas, the thought, the spiritual world, the spirit, the abstraction. And the other line represents the lower world, well, the human world. So it's the body, the matter, the sensation, the lived experience, the human form. So in Gemini stands right in between the heaven and the earth, the mind and the matter, the yin and yang. That's the most important part of Gemini. If you look at the symbol, the lines are joined. This isn't a split, it's a relationship between those two words which Gemini represent. Well, it's the relationship which the myth represent as well. So the mythology of Gemini is about two brothers, Castor and Pollux, which show up in Greek mythology. So the Castor and Pollux were twins. So they were born to the same mother, Leda. They were twins, they arrived together, they looked identical, and from the very beginning, were completely inseparable. They trained together, traveled together, did the adventures together, they fought side by side. However, even though they shared the same wombs, Castor and Pollux came from different realms, as their father was different. Castor was the mortal son of King of Sparta. Well, so that represents the human side in us, the mortal side in us, the effort, the skill, the discipline, and the limits of human body. But Pollux was the divine son of Zeus. So he was conceived when Zeus appeared as a swan. So he is the immortal son. So he is immortal. He represents the divine intelligence and the eternity which never dies. So, well, they were not similar, right? They were poles apart, but they were bonded. They were bonded by not similarity, but by devotion. The deep need for connection, dialogue, companionship, they both needed each other to survive because where one was limited, the other supported. Where one was vulnerable, the other stood guard. So they understood each other quite instinctively. And the relationship was one of belonging, not dominance, no comparison. It's belonging to each other. In the mythology, Castor and Pollux were not the passive figures, they were adventurers. They sailed with Jason on the Argo, they faced terrifying storms, and they were always together fighting the battles, journeying the unknown. But in one of the journey, um, Castor is killed because he was mortal. He was killed in a battle, and he descended into the underworld. Now, Pollux, who was immortal, he cannot die. He is divine. He is eternal. But he gets lost without Castor because to him, eternity without relationship becomes unbearable. That's the only way he knew how to exist in relationship with another, with his brother. So Pollux goes to Zeus and pleads, bring my brother back, or I will take my life instead. I cannot bear that loss. Zeus is moved by this devotion and offers a compromise. So the twins, he says, will share immortality, living forever between worlds. Half the year in the underworld, and which is the human realm, and half the year in the heavens, which is with the divinity, light, and eternity. But they have to move forever between the worlds. And that is the reason in the sky, Gemini appears only for half the year. But if you look at symbolically from the myth, that's the core of Gemini. The core of Gemini is duality. And that's their strength too. And we look at that strength. So Castor in the myth, he represents the human part of us, right? The effort, the discipline, the time, the body, as we said. And Pollux represent the divine part in us. And Gemini lives with both inside. They live with body and spirit, the effort and the intuition, the humanity and the divine. So Gemini are not choosing one, but learning how to keep both alive, as both of them need each other always. There is no superiority. They both are equal in the existence. And that is the reason for Gemini, communication is not optional. It is must. Because communication is the only way that they bridge that gap, the bridge that allows the movement between the two worlds, the reason and the feeling, the spirit and the matter, the mind and the body, the human world and the heaven. So Gemini's gift is translation. It's not choosing, but translating information from one world to the another. So for them, if they stop communicating, they stop moving together, the bond breaks. Talking, thinking, questioning, exchanging ideas is the only way Gemini keeps the world connected within themselves. So that is the why Gemini talks. They are the most chatty sign in the zodiac. Because Gemini is not only talking, sometimes they are not talking because they have something polished and something great to say. They are speaking to understand themselves, to reconcile the contradictions that exist, and keep the inner worlds from drifting, both the worlds from drifting too far apart. Because for them, silence can feel dangerous, and silence can threaten separation. That is the reason Gemini is often a storyteller, the messenger, the connector. They are mostly the writers because they are communicator between the two worlds. Now, another quality about Gemini is the social energy. Because if you look back at the myth, in Gemini, even in the symbol and the myth, the two beings exist in relationship with each other. They are not meant to walk alone. Like Castor and Pollux, they move through the world in relationship, always seeking the other half, its mirror, it's the conversation. So that's why Geminis are highly social beings. They have a very strong social quotient, and if it is expressed in the highest potential with a high social quotient, They can read the room instinctively. They know how to speak to different people in different ways. They help other others understand each other, right? And they bring opposite viewpoints onto the table. They have a very amazing quality to shift according to the conversation. So with them, a lot of times Geminis, with them, people feel very seen. The conversations move forward, and the ideas cross pollinate. So for them, they don't socialize just for fun. They socialize to connect realities. But if you look back at the myth, Pollux can survive anything except being alone in one world. So he knows his only existence, he only exists in relationship to help his brother. So sometimes in the lowest expression, their sociability becomes a defense because they just don't want to be alone. They avoid being alone. So that time, Gemini, their sociability comes with a force, right? With a fear. So of losing the other. So they can talk endlessly but don't listen deeply. They avoid emotional conversations or conversation which has emotional weight. They flip between people and conversation just to feel that energy, the fear of losing the other person. And sometimes they might seem to others as flaky and surface level, but actually they are not fake. For them, silence feels like abandonment. And that's why they sometimes say they different things in different rooms just to stay connected with everyone. And I think it's because of those qualities, Gemini also represent the technology which connects people, which exchanges information, the AI, the telephone, the phones, all that is in the realm of Gemini. All that technology, internet, social media is all in the realm of Gemini, because through that we connect with one another. Another quality of Gemini is their curiosity. So in the story which we heard, the twins are born in completely different realms, right? From the moment they were born, they are questioning living inside this bond. What is like to be in others over there in your world? So they are always curious. And Gemini's curiosity comes from the same place. It's always this urge to ask, what's on the other side of this idea? What happens if I look at this differently? What am I missing? So Gemini is never satisfied with a single viewpoint, because the myth itself says one perspective is never the whole truth. So that is on the positive spectrum, their curiosity. But on the negative spectrum, people might find them a bit nosy, because they are very curious always about the other. Another quality about Gemini is their adaptability. They're very adaptable and flexible people, and it's not a learned skill for them, but they were born into it. Because just like in the myth, the brothers don't live in one stable reality, they live between two worlds. From the very beginning, their lives require constant adjustment. Even after Zeus blesses them, they have to constantly move between two realities. Their reality, even after death, is not static. So Gemini knows deep in their bones that reality is not static. The things, the people, the context are always changing. So there is no single truth that fits all situations. So for them, their adaptability is their intelligence, because that's how they thrive in any situation, which they are meant to. But think like that. when you always moving between the worlds, you can just struggle to feel settled anywhere. That's why Gemini's curiosity and adaptability can turn easily into restlessness because they feel the change just to avoid pain or to avoid death. They might change from one idea to next conversation to next possibility. And that can come across as they cannot settle at all. So these are the keywords of Gemini, and now you understand the keywords through the myth. I have also attached the link to the file where you will find the keywords of Gemini, the highest and the lowest potential, and you can just have a look at them. Going forward, just this is the myth, but if we bring it down from the stars to human, what would Gemini represent? So to me, when I think of Gemini, it represents a child between 6 to 10 year old, right? Have you met that kid whose language is fully turned on? But most importantly, they have learned that words connect words. So the Gemini child is always translating. They translate their inner world, their thoughts, feeling, their impression into these words, stories, imagination, and the questions they ask. But at the same time, they translate their outer world back into the meaning. What did that, why did that happen? What does this mean? How is it connected to that? So for them, for that child, for you, it might sound like just noise. But when you are really listening to them, it's not noise. They are talking to make sense of their reality. All their questions, ideas, our connections are spoken out loud. And something which people miss in that child is the wisdom, the observant wisdom, that quiet wisdom, because they are always noticing details the adults often overlook. They pick up those inconsistencies. They sense when something doesn't quite add up, right? And sometimes unexpectedly, they say something that feels far older than their age. And this child is also very sociable creature. He can easily move between people, can talk easily to adults, to kids, ask questions, share stories, because they are genuinely curious. It's not to impress, but they're genuinely curious to learn about the world, about the people. So their genuine sociability is really about translating information. And through that lens of a child, if we put that into different houses and planets. So now I would like you to pause and get your chart and see in which planet you will definitely have a house in Gemini, but you might have some houses in Gemini. So we'll look at it one by one, how the Gemini child, behaves. So think of if your planet is in Gemini, these are the roles that the child plays, and the houses are the areas where the child shows up. So let us start with the planets. So let's say Sun in Gemini. Sun, your ego self. Whatever I've said, you're like, oh, that's me. You know it, right? So this is your identity. You really know that you are a Gemini. You will say, oh, that's who I am. But if your moon is in Gemini, that's your emotions. So the emotions that think. So your emotions will be processed through words. Your mood shifts quickly as thoughts shift. So the child would like to say, can we talk about what just happened? You will talk about your emotions. You will think about your emotions. If you have a Mercury in Gemini, well, Mercury is the ruler, so Gemini is happy. Mercury is quite happy in Gemini. You're quite smart. You are a natural storyteller. The child connects everything to, they are very curious, very, very curious, and they will notice all the details. They think out loud. They have a very interesting pattern recognizing mind, and they are very intelligent. If you have a Venus in Gemini, that's your love language. So your child in you will fall in love with minds. It will be attracted to humor, ideas, intelligence. You want your partner to mentally stimulate you. You will flirt with words. Most of the times, your love language will be words, uh, affirmative words. And you would like to know about the partner. You would like to have conversation. You'll say, "Tell me more about you, how you think." If you have a Mars in Gemini, that energy splits and multiplies. So the child wants to try everything, right? That's action. So you will act through ideas and movement. You will multitask easily, but you also move from one idea to another because you're always active, and you'll always be thinking, what if we try it this way, right? Always pushing boundaries. If you have a Jupiter in my Gemini, you will be a curious philosopher. The child would say, "Do you know this?" If you have a Saturn in Gemini, the Saturn is restriction. So the child would say, "Let me think before I say that." If you have a Uranus in Gemini, Uranus is innovative, original, unconventional ideas. So the the child would, it will be a strange and brilliant child. Whatever the child would say might sound weird to the other person because it's unconventional. If it is a Neptune in Gemini, it's a dream speaking child. The child in you would say, "I don't know how, but I just know this," because you're just connected. You're very poetic. You're connected to another realm. If you have a Pluto in Gemini, Pluto is power, right? So you will, and transformation. So you will use the language to transform because you know very clearly that words have power. So these are the planets in Gemini. Now look at, if you're Gemini child, through houses, right? So wherever Gemini sits, that area of life will behave like a Gemini child. Think about it like that. So if your first house in Gemini, you if your sun is somewhere else and your first house in Gemini, you might not see yourself like as a Gemini, but others might. They know that your identity to others is very curious, youthful, expressive. So people will see you like that. If you have a second house in Gemini, it's your values, your money. So you will get that through ideas and communication. Basically, the child would earn with his mind. If you have a third house in Gemini, Gemini is very happy in that house. It's home. It feels home there. It's a house of Mercury. So it will be very communicative. So they will have a very sharp communication. So let me tell you what I learned. Life revolves around learning and connection. If you have a fourth house in Gemini, fourth house is the the home. So that will be your home environment. You will talk everything through here. So your home will be quite mentally active and talkative. That's how you connect with the people in your home. If you have a fifth house in Gemini, the fifth house is creativity, words, play, storytelling. So you'll use storytelling and words to play, to have fun. That is your language to experience joy. If you have a sixth house in Gemini, sixth house is your daily life. So your daily life would need variety and stimulation. You might say, I cannot function if I'm bored. The child cannot function if it is bored. So you are looking for some stimulation in your life. If you have a seventh house in Gemini, your relationships require conversation. Your intimacy language is communication and conversation. So you would say, your child would say, we need to talk to stay close. If you have eighth house in Gemini, your curiosity, you will be very curious about secrets, psychology, taboo, and you would like to talk about it. And even with your intimate partner, and you will say, tell me what's hidden what's hidden. You have to talk to me about that. If you have a ninth house in Gemini, which is me, you can see different perspectives, right? Because ninth house is about beliefs, teachers. So you know that truth has many versions and you are curious to learn about all the truths. You love philosophy. That's me. I am always curious about different perspectives and philosophies. If you have a 10th house in Gemini, that's how you show up in the world. Your voice is your work. So you might have a public role as a communicator, teacher, connector, where you will be talking or writing or publishing. If you have 11th house in Gemini, 11th house is social networks, your communities. So that's how your communities would look like, where you are exchanging perspective. You would like to exchange perspective in your communities or your networks. If you have a 12th house in Gemini, which is the unseen hidden realm, so your thoughts comes, I don't know, you also don't know from where. So you hear things before others do. You are constantly communicating with the other unseen realms through dreams. That's how you'll be always channeling information. So that's the how Gemini behaves in different planets and houses. That gives a unique signature to a human being, right? We talked about Gemini being this curious, talkative, chatty, communicative child. But how does this child grows up? What is the how to reach the highest potential of Gemini? So that is Gemini matures when they understand they don't need to talk all the time to stay connected or not from the fear of being alone. They learn when they don't have the fear. They learn they understand that that's their gift, the translation, but they learn when to speak and when to listen, when to ask and when to sit with not knowing. Because when the Gemini child grows up, they become the translator between the worlds. So let's see, what is Gemini doing in your chart? So wherever your Gemini is in the planet and in the house, the curious child lives there. That area of your life is always asking questions or seeking answers, always translating, always trying to understand itself through interaction. So I'll invite you to ask yourself, is this part of my life curious and connected, or it's busy and restless? Because that's how you will understand how you can consciously live your energy of Gemini. Because Zeus gives the twins this blessing of embodying both and keeping the conversation alive with awareness. So, how can you keep that conversation alive without losing its center? Because Gemini cannot survive in the mental realm alone. It needs information from the other realm. But Gemini can also not live in the abstract alone. It needs experience, it needs embodiment, it needs grounding of human body. That is the real gift of Gemini. That's how the Gemini energy mature. So when you allow a little more silence in the area of your life without shutting down curiosity, that's where Gemini begins to mature and it reaches its highest potential, which you're born with, being the messenger, the translator, and the connector, the bridge between the two worlds. So we have come to the end of Gemini. If this conversation sparked another thought, reminded you of a story, or sent your mind wandering somewhere unexpected, or you thought of someone, then Gemini this did the job. Thank you so much for listening to Sky Astrology. And as always say, the sky is within you. These archetypes aren't out there. They live inside of you. And when you understand them, we stop reacting. We start living with awareness and intention. If you like this episode, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so as you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay grounded, stay passionate, stay curious, and stay connected